common question we get is regarding phone calls from detectives and investigators. So, detective calls you, you receive that phone call, and they are accusing you of a potential crime or want to see what your involvement is about something that has happened recently. And so, do you have to talk to that detective if they call you and start questioning you about an event?
Absolutely not. So detectives don't work for you; they work for the state, right? So it's one that when an investigator's talking to you, there's any number of reasons why they might be, right? It might be, hey, we're looking into something, we heard something, we have something. But what they're really looking for is, can they get anything out of you when they're investigating you?
Right, exactly. Because at the end of the day, the best piece of evidence anyone can ever have against you is an admission, right? So it
Mhm.
is so simple for an officer to ask you a question and you explain exactly what happened. Well, now you just put it on a silver platter for them to convict you of this crime. And it may not even be that you are the primary person involved in the crime, right? You could be an accomplice after the fact. And any type of criminal involvement is going to play a role in you potentially picking up a charge against yourself. So you can't do a whole lot in talking to an investigator or detective that is going to help you. It generally, in our experience, is only going to hurt you. There are limited circumstances where it may be a good idea, but in the vast majority, I mean, 90+% of cases, you are just going to hurt yourself, which leads to people think, I can talk to the detective. I can talk my way out of this. I can just give them the circumstances behind why I did what I did. Is that a good idea? Is that going to help someone?
There is no shortage of cases that we get a phone call, and in a month or two after they spoke with a detective, now somebody's getting charged, right? Because it's one that when the investigator reaches out or a detective reaches out, these are generally not going to be very combative phone calls, right? They're going to be very polite, they're going to be very courteous, they're just going to be acting like, hey, we just heard something, we're just trying to figure out what's going on, because it's one that they want to see, like Brandon was talking about, if they can get that best evidence out of you, is get that admission out of you. Because in a criminal prosecution, the state's always going to have to prove the essential elements of the charge, right? And one of them can be a mens rea, which just means your mental state, right? So whether you intended to do something, whether you knowingly did something, right? These are things that might not seem as important in the moment, and things that most people are not
Yeah,
thinking about on that phone call, right? But it's
absolutely.
one that the investigator knows what they're doing, right? They're not talking to you just to, talk about sports. They're talking to you because, hey, we heard something. We're trying to figure it out, and you are the primary suspect or secondary suspect,
Yeah.
like you talked about. So,
Yeah.
generally, like Brandon said, there's not going to be a good reason for you to talk to them. Are there some instances where it could be a good idea? Sure. Overwhelming majority, it's you're not going to talk your way out of it, because if they're talking to you in the first place, they probably have something, and at that stage, all they're looking for is probable cause. They're not looking for guilt.
Right. Exactly. I mean, in order to get an arrest warrant, all they need is probable cause. And they probably
Mhm.
have probable cause if they're reaching out to you to begin with. There is a chance that they can have an arrest warrant pretty much ready to go, but they're just waiting to sign it and get a judge to sign off on it to actually arrest you with it. So a lot of the times they are waiting to get additional evidence against you to make their case easier to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Because yes, they just need probable cause, that lower standard, to arrest you. But in order to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, I think you brought up a great point talking about intent, right?
Mhm.
There are so many intent crimes that are required to have a specific intent that are very difficult to prove unless the person is explaining why they did what they did. It's just circumstantial evidence based on the surrounding circumstances. You can argue to a jury, or a prosecutor would argue to a jury, that you must have had the intent. Why else would you have done what you did? Well, the easiest way to prove that intent is to ask you directly and have you answer those questions. And I think it's important. We always have the right to remain silent, even at a jury trial, right? And so the judge, outside of the jury's presence, will actually question the defendant and the defense attorney to make sure, it's called moment, to make sure that you understood that you have the right to testify or not testify. There's a jury instruction. The judge is going to tell the jury that if you decide not to testify, they cannot use it against you because the burden is on the state, not on you as a defendant or an accused in a case. So you always have that right to remain silent. Even at a jury trial, it cannot be used against you. Use it. Don't talk to a detective. Generally, you're only going to make the situation worse. Provide the state more evidence to convict you of the crime, to prove their case against you. It's not going to benefit you in just about every case. I mean, it just is not going to help.
No, and it's one that we've talked about it before, but we're not having court on the roadside, right? So it's one that even though the detective might not be coming to your home, it might just be a phone call. Remember, if you have a side of your story to give, there is absolutely a time and a place to give it. And it is not to an investigator who can use those statements against you. And like you talked about with the specific intent crimes, it's one thing for them to have something and they're just chasing leads. It's another thing, just to once again double back to your point, to have a recorded confession from you, right? One of them is a slam dunk prosecution for the state. The other is more difficult, right? You do not want to make the state's job any easier on them, right? You have a constitutional right to remain silent. Use it.
Absolutely. I think, once again, you brought up a good point, Andrew, in that everyone wants to tell their side of the story, right? That's why you hire Andrew and I. That's why you hire criminal defense attorneys, so that we can tell your story for you. Because any statements that we make cannot be used against you, and we can strategically bring that information to a prosecutor in a way that it is going to benefit you, so that they cannot prove the intent to commit the crime, or whatever the element is that is missing for them to be able to establish that crime beyond a reasonable doubt. That is where we come in as defense attorneys to argue on your behalf. It's never going to be a good idea to argue on your own behalf. You're just going to give more evidence against yourself, because investigators and detectives, they are trained and they go through continuing learning education classes to learn how to get people in interrogations to answer questions. Like Andrew mentioned, they're going to be friendly. They're going to make it seem like they are trying to help you, trying to prevent you from being arrested and convicted of this crime. Or if you cooperate, hey, we'll make sure that they go easy on you. You're not going to go to prison. It's okay. We'll make sure that of it. They have no basis in deciding what punishment you get. Only a prosecutor does if they make a plea deal that you are happy with and accept. Otherwise, it's up to the judge if you are found guilty. Or if you have a sentencing hearing and plead guilty but keep the case open for the judge to decide. So that detective, generally speaking, is not going to have much of a bearing. But again, you always want to be cooperative in the sense of being friendly and cordial. You don't want to curse the detective out or be rude in any way that they want to make sure or talk to the prosecutor about you in a negative light. You just want to invoke your rights. Remain silent. Don't talk to the detective.
And they can't use it against you, right? It's one that at the end of the day, like Brandon was talking about, there's no reason to, be hostile or any way against the detective, right? It's one that we're not trying to draw any additional suspicion or have anybody else looking at you or move you up on anybody's radar, but it's one that be firm, right? And it can be tough talking to police, right? We understand it. It's not easy to tell the guy on the other end of the phone, hey, no, I don't want to talk to you, because it feels like a pressuring situation, right? It's tough. But in that moment, you've got to be firm. You've got to understand, you've got to be looking more than just at this phone call. You've got to be looking ahead at what potential exposure am I setting myself up for if I tell this guy my side of the story when I don't have any protection to do so, right?
Absolutely.